Do you believe that this trial should happen before the election?
I mean, I think the American people have the right to know the facts, that this is not a witch hunt.
That is Brian Butler, a guy who worked for Donald Trump for 20 years. You might have known him as Trump employee number 5, because up until last night, that's what he was identified as in the documentation having to do with Donald Trump's alleged massive theft of classified documents. He's the guy who knows exactly about the theft of those documents because he, according to him, unwittingly participated in the hiding and transport of boxes filled with those documents. And he has some incredibly damning stuff to say about Donald Trump and the other co-conspirators to this crime. But bear in mind, that's not being talked about in DC today because instead we're talking about Joe Biden's memory or whatever. But that said, he talks about how they had this truck that was rented. I think it was like an SUV or whatever. I think it was Walton Auto that had it. And he didn't understand why they needed it because Trump was going on a trip, but generally Walton Auto and Brian Butler aren't the ones who are like packing up his stuff in an SUV to bring it to the airport. But he said in this case, he ended up putting some of the luggage in there, and then there were, quote, a bunch of boxes. They were the boxes that were in the indictment, the white bankers boxes. That's what I remember loading. So he helped them to load up an SUV with these boxes to get them out of Mar-a-Lago and move them. And apparently this was on the same day that Trump's legal team was talking to the DOJ, which was trying their best to get those documents back. So he was there for it, okay? He saw this. This was not a couple of personal diaries sitting next to a Corvette to be used in a biography or something. This was a willful attempt to evade the recovery of these documents. And what did Trump do with the documents? Well, there was a great question about that.
Were there ever any instances when you were still working there that you witnessed where Trump was, in your view, carelessly throwing around national security information?
You know, this really, stood out to me, but in, I believe it was April of 2021, there was a member, Anthony Pratt, who he was coming, he flew in the night before.
He's an Australian billionaire.
He finishes his meeting with the former president, gets in the car, and his chief of staff says, "How did the meeting go?" Pratt, without saying, just says, "He told me, and it would be, US military, classified information of what he told him about Russian submarines and US submarines." And that's really all I remember hearing, and I went, what? I'm thinking this. I'm in the car, I'm like, did I just hear that? So it wasn't like, oh, the meeting went well, we talked about it. He went straight to the point. He told me that the US subs and with the Russian subs and, something that would more than likely in my mind be classified.
And he also revealed later in that interview that Australian billionaire was paying millions of dollars to host events at Mar-a-Lago, far and above what other people were spending on their events.
Before we continue with the story, we depend on members to keep on going. Don't wait. Click join now on YouTube.
And he was getting something for his money. A couple different things. He was getting beautiful cake, chocolate cake, best cake you've ever seen, and maybe classified details about Russian submarines. Because he paid a lot of money. He paid for access, not just to Mar-a-Lago, but to the former president, who once he's there and you're spending money at his place, he just starts babbling about national security details, okay? Not things that are going into an official biography, personal stuff. He is revealing to foreign billionaires classified security information about our military and the military of our greatest adversaries in the world. So it seems like the sort of thing that probably merits a little bit of national conversation. Maybe Jim Jordan, who likes to cosplay that he's concerned about the handling of classified documents, maybe he could at least mention this because it seems pretty damning. Rayyvana?
You'd think it would be brought up in a hearing about the handling of classified documents, especially as you pointed out, this is a story that just broke yesterday, and it should be bigger than it seems to be. But of course, we know that the Republicans don't actually care about getting to the heart of any issue. They just want to score cheap political points, and a lot of the Democrats too. But that being said, I do want to say liberal media, I'm sure, will try to make Butler out to be some sort of hero, and I won't deny that naming himself is to some extent brave because he knows that he's going to be the victim of relentless attacks from Trump's MAGA cult fan base, who anybody who's spoken out against him has felt their ire. But of course, a big part of this was him trying to establish his innocence and state that he didn't actually know what was going on. And we shouldn't make someone out to be a hero who voluntarily worked for Donald Trump for 20 years, of course.
Hold on, Rayyvana. Okay, I'm not saying he's a hero on the level of like a Captain America, but he's at least a hero on the level of Liz Cheney. Can we at least agree on that? Anyway, I'm kidding.
Right.
Yeah, to me, what matters is that he has this information and he's revealing it to the investigators. He was there for 20 years. He worked with Walt Nada. He worked with Carlos de Oliveira. Like, he understands all the stuff that was going on, and he can reveal incredibly damning things. Now, he's revealing it to save his behind. Let's be clear about that. But he is revealing it. So here's another damning one. Apparently, the property manager, Carlos, reveals to Brian Butler about Walt Nauta traveling to Palm Beach in late June 2022, at a time when Nauta and de Oliveira were allegedly interested in deleting surveillance tapes of a storage room where boxes were being kept at the club. Butler recalls that he told him that Nauta would be visiting. Then a day later, de Oliveira warned Butler that Nauta's visit should be kept secret. He told Butler that Nauta was interested in learning about how surveillance footage from the club would be saved. Another oddity to Butler. Because they're deleting the surveillance footage. They're covering up the crimes they committed that were intended to cover up the original crime, which was the massive theft of the classified documents. And let me just say, one of the most pointless sentences in American political discourse. Can you imagine if Joe Biden, can you imagine if it was revealed that that Hunter Biden was going to delete like surveillance footage of the camera that's on the Corvette or something as they unload documents in advance of the raid? Like, this is so comically damning, so comically worse than the stuff that's being discussed literally as we're live right now in her testimony, that it feels like a dream or like a prank show or something. That this is like, oh, it was a fascinating interview or whatever. Now we're moving on. Let's talk about the fact that Biden stumbled over a year once. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, it just immediately, reading all this information made me think of, there's a fantastic documentary called The Smartest Guys in the Room about Enron and the Enron scandal and the criminal enterprise, so to speak, that they were running. And the name of the documentary is very tongue in cheek because they were idiots and everything they did was very out in the open, and they were, blatant about the crimes they were committing, and they didn't do a good job covering it up. And that's how so much of the, that's everything about Donald Trump. He's not a criminal mastermind. He's an idiot. I mean, he's live tweeting through his crimes. He's telling anybody who will listen about the crimes he's committing. He's showing national secrets and, highly classified documents to, the likes of Kid Rock. Okay, this is not a guy who's good at covering his tracks. Just like, the people at January 6th literally live streamed themselves committing crimes and then had no defense when they had to show up in court. It's just, these guys are not exactly the smartest guys in the room.
100%. Yeah, and we shouldn't be so surprised. I mean, the dude went decades only experiencing the most minor legal obstacles or consequences. So he commits all sorts of different crimes. And then he starts getting seriously prosecuted, but he's already done so many different crimes that we just sort of have to wade through them all. And this is who he is. He's not a criminal mastermind. He's just a criminal who has brain worms like the sandworms of Arrakis. There's just nothing left of his head. Something Don Jr. Spice. I don't know.